just need you to know that there's a scene where the female main character is holding a dagger to the male main character's throat. Also be prepared for it to just get wacky. That's all I'll say. So you're looking for your next favorite trilogy. I got you. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Marissa. I like to talk about books and book design, and I'm gonna be your host for the evening. Tonight, we're just talking about 3 of my favorite trilogies. And let me go ahead and start by telling you that yes, I am a liar, because we're actually going to be talking about 4. This first trilogy, it felt so obvious that I didn't want to include it, but I would be remiss if I did not mention The Hunger Games. The Hunger Games is that girl. It is the trilogy of all trilogies. I know it is quite the obvious answer, but I didn't actually read the series until about 2 years ago. So if you didn't read it when it originally came out and you're feeling like the time has passed, I'm here to tell you that the time has not passed and you should read it. Go ahead and hop on the train, join the rest of us. I promise you will not regret it. And if you're someone who first read it when it came out, but you haven't gone back to revisit the series, then go ahead and do that for me, okay? I just had to get that out of the way. But with that, we'll go ahead and get into my first recommendation, and that would be the Folk of the Air trilogy. Admittedly, this is my favorite series, so I think this is the perfect series to get you out of a reading slump because it's very quick and easy to get through because you will just keep turning those pages. This is also the first fantasy series I ever read. If you're looking to dip your tootsies into fantasy, I think this is a good one to start with because the mortal world is still within the series. All the fantastical elements are compared to real things that you might have more of a understanding. Basically, the world building isn't too crazy. But let me go ahead and tell you what it's about in case you haven't heard. I know this is quite a popular series, but she really had her moment back in 2019, and I've heard people kind of stop talking about it, so I'm gonna go ahead and bring her back up because we need to still keep talking. So the first book in the series is The Cruel Prince, which follows our female main character, Jude. Jude is a human in the fairy world. She was kidnapped as a young girl alongside her sisters, one of which is her twin, and taken to live in the fairy world. And typically in the fairy world, humans are not treated equally. They usually act as slaves to fairies. However, Jude and her sisters are raised up as equals because they're kidnapped by their stepfather, I guess you could say. The twins have a half sister who is half fairy. It's a whole thing that you'll understand when you read it. They're raised up alongside the high fae, but they obviously are not treated equally. They are treated quite awfully. This is really a story about Jude wanting to rise up and become powerful and join the fairy court as a mortal. This is a story about revenge and betrayal and, most importantly, enemies to lovers. This is peak slow burn, true enemies to lovers. And I think that's one of the things I appreciated so much about the series. There's no insta love here. But also consider that I do not consider this series to be romantasy at all. I think it's more so of a political fantasy. Jude is training to become a warrior and a spy and ultimately win a place in fairy court. Now, there are some spin-offs which I do not consider to be part of the trilogies. This is still a true trilogy in my book. I really just cannot say enough how much I love this series, and I really want you all to read it so that we can talk about it. And if everything I've said hasn't convinced you yet, I just need you to know that there's a scene where the female main character is holding a dagger to the male main character's throat. And need I say more? Need I say more? The second trilogy, we're just gonna completely jump in the opposite direction with a horror crime thriller from Stephen King. And that would be the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. I absolutely love the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. I think it is really overlooked in King's catalog. It's some of his best work of truly depraved and fucked up characters. This story takes place during the recession around 2008, and it starts in the time when it was really hard to find a job, and we see these people getting ready to go to a job fair, desperately hoping to find work so that they could continue to provide for their families in this really hard time. A detail I remember that stuck with me for so long after reading this is that some of these people got there so early in the morning, in the middle of the night, to line up to be the first one to be able to hand employers their resume in order to hopefully get a job. And while these people are waiting, someone in a Mercedes shows up and plows down the crowd, killing people and seriously injuring many others. So it opens with this really depraved act of violence, but then we get a look at the detective who was assigned to the case to try and figure out who this killer was, and ultimately he failed and was not able to figure it out before he retires. So now in retirement, he's looking back on his life with regret, wishing he had been able to figure out who this killer was, when one day he gets a message from the killer, basically mocking him, saying, "Haha, I got away with it, you couldn't figure it out. And by the way, I might even do it again. So now this detective is in retirement and he's jumping back on the case, trying to figure out who this psychotic person is before he harms more people. This book is such an interesting game of cat and mouse, and you get both perspectives from the detective and the killer. And I cannot stress enough that I think it's some of King's best work. It's just so fun and gripping. I will admit, the second book in the series is like a little bit wacky, and I would consider this to be a crime thriller, but if I remember correctly, there are some very weird and strange supernatural elements in it as well. I can't remember exactly how it's portrayed, but I know things do get a little bit weird, but that's what's so fun about Stephen King's books. So go into it expecting to read some really fucked up stuff. Also be prepared for it to just get wacky. That's all I'll say. And the last trilogy I have to recommend for you is also a crime thriller, but it's more so of a mystery, and it is young adult. And that would be the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. Please do not let the kind of cringy title deter you from reading it. I know it's bad. I think this was one that I was like hesitant to log on Goodreads because I was like, I don't know, I was getting war flashbacks to like the early 5 Sauce days. If you know, you know. But ultimately I did read it and I really enjoyed it, and I was surprised because I don't read so much young adult these days, but I still think it's one that I could enjoy as an adult, and I think obviously young adults would enjoy it as well. And I can't remember if I mentioned or not, but technically The Cruel Prince is also YA, but I think that one doesn't read so much as YA as this one does. A Good Girl's Guide to Murder follows our main character, Pippa Fitzamobi, who is going into her senior year of high school for her senior capstone. She decides to write a paper about a crime that was committed in her town a few years back that has kind of become legend, and is the murder of this girl named Andy Bell, who was allegedly killed by her boyfriend. Pippa doesn't think that that's the whole truth to the story, so she decides to investigate it for herself, and things get really dark and twisty in there. But it's a lot of fun. I think there are some really good twists in there that you won't see coming. Admittedly, Pippa had to grow on me. She did. She's kind of like a goody two-shoes teacher's pet character, but I don't know, I really enjoyed her voice, and I enjoyed getting into her mind to see how she solved these crimes. Of course, they get into more wacky things as the series persists. This is one I really enjoyed, and I really recommend it as an audiobook because there are kind of some audio elements. I know the second one, she's like hosting a podcast, so it really worked as an audiobook. Go into that one expecting a little bit of YA cringe. Like, if you can't handle YA at all, maybe pass on this one. And basically that's a wrap. Those are some of my 3 favorite trilogies. I think trilogies are great if you're in a reading slump because it's low commitment, but you know if it's good that you got 2 more books to follow that are going to be really enjoyable. I love a good trilogy, and I would love to know what your favorite trilogy is if I didn't mention it. And if you've read any of these, please let me know your thoughts if you like them. If you didn't, sorry. Yeah, that's all I have for you. Just a quick, short and simple little video. Little bit of recommendations for you. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, maybe give it a like, maybe subscribe to see what I come up with next. This is just a fun little bonus video because I have COVID right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.